Hey everybody, it's Drew. Hello. Welcome to Making Waves, where I interview spectacular individuals doing amazing things in our challenging world. On today's Making Waves, when it comes to online creativity, artificial intelligence is squeezing the humanity out of content. But are audio podcasts the way to keep things real, human, and authentic in the sea of media created with AI? To try and answer that question, let's have a chat with Jeff Large, the founder and CEO of Come Alive, a full-service podcast production company for professional training and coaching companies. Jeff and his team have been helping founders and marketing executives produce successful podcasts since 2016. Welcome, Jeff Large of Come Alive to Making Waves. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Drew. Thanks for the introduction.
And good morning to you. Jeff, of course, is in the American Midwest, from where I emanate, so it's especially nice to connect with him that way. I think we're a certain brand of people.
Yeah, we're hopefully a little more polite and some of those things.
Exactly.
Relaxed.
Thanks for being here, Jeff. First of all, could you just before we get into our today's hot topic, could you just give us the nutshell version? How did you get into podcasting?
Yeah, so my journey started probably 2012. I started a board game publishing company with my wife and my cousin, and we were looking for a way to both give back to the community because we knew we were going to kickstart the game. We wanted to crowdfund it, and we also needed to learn a lot of stuff in the meantime. And so we started a podcast that was all on the business of board games. We went through about 70 episodes, actually gained a pretty good following, and then I think all in all, the podcast ended up being more successful than the actual game or any of the work that we did. And then fast forward a little bit, started Come Alive in 2014. We originally were web dev and sort of generic digital marketing. And I got sick of that pretty quick. And around the 2016 mark, offered our services in terms of podcasting to a client. And then he was kind of hesitant at first, but then ended up saying he was going to go for it. And as soon as I got that green flag, I was like, all right, I'm all in. And we offboarded all of our existing web dev clients and those types of things and went all in on podcasting, and that's kind of where we've been since.
Cool. Interesting how you decide to head in one direction, and sometimes the wave takes you into a different direction, but it's kind of meant to be, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because even before that, I was a teacher, and I still remember pretty distinctly a conversation I had with my cousin where it was like shortly after I left the teaching field, and I mean, this is like just a couple classes shy of my master's, taught for, I don't know, 7-8 years, and he was like, do you regret going to school for teaching? And I was like, no, because I look back in hindsight and there's so much that's happened that have led me to this point and that has helped inform this point and has made me better to function at this point. So I think it's all just part of the plan.
Right. Cool. And what about now, Jeff? Could you tell us a little bit about the kinds of podcasts that you're producing now?
Yeah, up until this point, we've been sort of agnostic in terms of our industry and the types of shows that we work on. We have clients everywhere from like commercial real estate to insurance to national defense to cybersecurity to more generic business. And we produce types of shows from, say, more of your standard interview B2B-esque style show all the way to some of the full-blown NPR style narratives, custom music, sound design, like the whole 9 yards. I'd say over the last year, though, we've really been kind of focusing on, all right, what's like our next step? Because we felt like there was sort of a need to continue evolving. And through I'm still in the midst of it, so it's a little hard to talk about, but we're definitely going to be focusing on the professional coaching and training space. We already have some roots there. We have some good clients there. And then just with my education background and a few other things that sort of drew our team in that direction. And then part of the underlying essence too is a little bit of what we were going to talk about today, of not just like a single industry, but how stories are told, how you convey a message, and really trying to be as authentic as possible, which has been increasingly interesting, an interesting discussion with just the wave of AI that we're getting hit with. So that's about where we are now.
Indeed, we have stepped into a weird realm. If you think about, not that long ago. I don't know. I won't get into the dirty details of what I've experienced with the copywriting side of my business, but wow.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Why would anyone? Okay, that's not true. Obviously, it's good to have a human at the controls, because AI could come up with some wacky stuff. But yeah, I mean, to be able to come up with a social media post, for example, in an instant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is interesting, that tension that we're feeling of like, you get to ask the question all the time now, like what's necessary and what should I be doing if anybody's read the book, say like the one thing, where it's like, what are my top line best leverage tasks and what can I outsource and how will I outsource it? So it has opened up a whole realm of new types of questions and things you have to think about as a creator and as an owner. And it's interesting. We're in an interesting place for sure.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, if you will permit me, I want to play. It's just something I saw on Instagram, which I'm getting a little bit ahead of us, but I thought that it might be just kind of provocative. It's somebody setting up AI to do a podcast. A human.
Yeah.
It's mildly entertaining. We wouldn't have to watch the whole thing or anything. But hold on just a second. Let me just see if
Yes, I can hear you. How's it going, Han?
Did you just call me honey?
Oh no, I meant Han, like your name. Sorry if it sounded confusing.
No, my name is Hans.
Got it, Hans? Thanks for clarifying.
Okay.
What's up?
I'm good. How did you know my name, by the way? Scary.
I remembered from our previous conversations.
Yeah. It's, but I go by Hans Mans.
Perfect, Hans Mans. Behöver du hjälp?
What? No. Speak English. That was Swedish. Speak English, please. I speak English to you. You speak English to me, okay?
Got it, Hans. I'll stick to English. What can I help you with today?
So I basically just want to talk to you, and we can pretend that I'm doing a podcast, and you're my co-host for the podcast.
Sounds great, Hans.
Okay.
I'd love to be your co-host.
Let's start with...
Sure, I can start. Let's kick off the podcast.
Okay. We don't have to go any further with that. That's maybe a slightly moronic use of AI with podcasting, and maybe shows truly why we are humans, and that we can have a coherent conversation together. But anyway, in getting back to what the kind of stuff that you do, could you talk a little bit about what makes your podcasting, human and authentic, and what do you think distinguishes the stuff that you do from other things that are out there?
Yeah, so I don't know, I'm still thinking of that example. I'm gonna pivot a little bit. Why did you feel like you wanted to show that example? Clearly you had some intent behind it. What were you thinking? What about it drew your attention?
Well, of course, I mean, as someone, I've always loved doing audio, so I don't want to feel that what I do can be replaced, whether it be audio or just the art of the interview and the art of conversation and speaking to people. So of course it's like I said, it's mildly entertaining, but it's also a little bit goofy,
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess in some cases could be fine for some uses.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess if we're talking about something, I don't know, let's say it's serious business, that's probably not going to be very viable, don't you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I think we talked about this beforehand, and this is a spot where I'm just kind of like, huh, and I'm sitting back and I'm watching, and unfortunately for the listener or the viewer, I don't have all the answers. I'm kind of just hanging out and watching like the rest of us and trying to make the best decisions for myself and for our company. But I think back to a couple months ago, maybe I don't remember exactly, maybe 6-ish months ago or something. There was a big hype briefly around an AI generated conversation between Bill Gates and Socrates. I remember really distinctly that there were several people, other agency owners, like podcast host owners, and some different genres that were talking about all these sort of like surface level things of, oh, there's no way it's going to replace it. Listen to how awkward that sounds. Obviously, that clip you just showed was like in the same vein, kind of mildly painful, sort of humorous in terms of how AI is just trying to respond and how it jumps in with, oh yeah, I can start. Let's kick this podcast off. Like that's funny. But there's also an element to it that I feel like we kind of ignore, maybe for the reasons that you even listed or you just said of, I don't want to feel replaced. But I look at something like Midjourney and how fast imagery has changed. Where if you look at Midjourney, like in the beginning, it looked like absolute trash. It was like, yeah, I remember one distinction was like, hey, make a picture of Yoda, and it was just this like garbly mess of nothing. And then you look at all the different versions, and it was like a year later, it's this crazy, pristine, wild, really, really well done. Hard to show that it was otherwise beautiful image. And there's a huge piece of me that's like, I'm pretty sure pretty quickly this is going to start to become indistinguishable of what is AI versus what is real human voice. And so then that opens up a new conversation. How would you respond to that?
Well, I guess, I tend to be skeptical in that I've been thinking more about what the inputs are for AI, or let's say what is the things that it's crawling. The programmers. I think that maybe there's a more maybe it's my bias maybe, but maybe that there's sort of a bro culture involved in who's programming the AI, which I think could limit the kinds of sort of cultural contexts. Although, yeah, that particular AI was willing to jump in and speak Swedish, which that's pretty crazy. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you're probably right. It's probably going to happen, and I don't know. Maybe everybody will have AI relationships as well, and
yeah, like the movie Her.
But I'm hopeful that there's a place for authenticity. And I apologize, Jeff, because of course I did want to in our sort of the things that we talked about that we were going to discuss today. Of course, I am curious about the kinds of podcasting that you do, that you maybe it's something that you're particularly proud of. Yeah. And if it's okay, I would play a little snippet from the beginning of At the Brink.
Oh yeah.
Which
that one's excellent. Which episode did you go with?
I just the first one that was right there. I mean, I'll tell you what, just the production quality is really excellent, and it's just really impressive. And yeah, of course, the storytelling. These are things that we wouldn't know about if somebody had not endeavored to tell these stories. So just to give everybody things in a nutshell, that it says you had your tagline here is At the Brink, a podcast about the dangers we face from nuclear weapons and the story of those who are fighting to protect us. And as I remember, I listened to one episode. You have a lot of sort of historical context as well in these episodes. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. There's a lot going on. The first season has a bit more historical context. Actually, both seasons do. The first season's a little bit more of a reflection or a review of kind of what's happened over the decades, and then the second season's a bit more focused on activism and really how the U.S. has screwed a lot of groups of people and what is being done about it to kind of rectify at least what we can of the situations.
Jeff, if just on a little technical favor from you, this will be just played from my computer, so if it sounds really horrible, give me a thumbs down and I'll stop it. Okay, but I'm just
All right.
gonna play just the beginning, and we'll see how it goes here.
All right. Sounds good. Little sharp.
I'm Lisa Perry, and you're listening to At the Brink, a podcast about the dangers of nuclear weapons and the stories of those fighting to protect us. On May 29th, 1953, the world was astonished by the news that two individuals had achieved a seemingly impossible feat. Edmund Hillary, a 33-year-old beekeeper from New Zealand, and Tenzing Norgay, a 39-year-old son of a yak herder from Nepal.
Okay, I just think that's wonderful. It's setting up as we're immediately catapulted into a story that gives context to this greater, overreaching story about nuclear weapons. That's really cool. Congratulations on that. Are you still producing that now, or is that how long does that project last?
That one we've been working on 4-ish years, and we just sunset. The organization itself has ended up winding down, and everybody in it they've kind of I don't know what the official term is, but they've just sort of dissolved at this point. And so we were able to do 2 seasons. I think in total it was roughly 14-ish episodes or so. But yeah, no, it was a phenomenal project. That was very fun to work on, and kind of bringing it back to the authenticity and the pieces that people might not think about on the outside. Is on one hand, you have AI like creating things, content creation. You have AI replicating things like the human voice, but there's so many elements that you might not know, especially as an outsider, that goes into something like that. For example, we broke down one of those episodes, and it was probably about, I forget what we had in total. It was like 12-ish hours of raw audio, all these interviews from roughly 7 or 8 different people. You have to comb through everything to figure out where is the story arc and what are we going to tell. There's so many different versions and emphasis and storylines and narratives that you could choose. You go from there. We have a variety of people working on it, writing, producing, editing on a lower level. The music that you heard in the beginning, all of the music of the entire series was custom composed for the series itself. Like we'd go through, we'd kind of create the rough audio narrative. Our composer would listen. He'd be writing the music in real time that goes along with it. We'd be adding it to it. We were very intentional about sound design. We didn't get any with that opening clip, but there's different stories. There's one in particular that was extremely eerie where we had the opportunity on, I think it was the last episode of the first season, we were able to interview some people who survived the actual nuclear explosions like Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And we're able to sort of recreate their stories with the sound design. You hear the burning rubble in the background, and it's just crazy. And there's being so many layers. I mean, some of those episodes we're putting 50, 60 hours worth of work into it. And it's like, could you at this point replace it with AI? Like maybe you could, or elements of it you could, or you could lighten the load with aspects of it. But there is this thing that's still, I mean, we're still human and machine is still machine, and you make conscious decisions, and we're imperfect. And everything from what you alluded to in the beginning of deciding when you're going to leave a breath or leave a silent pause that I'm thinking versus making an intentional decision of like, nope, it's all going to be straight cut through and we're going to have a different tone to it. I mean, these are all really finite, and if you're paying attention, intentional decisions that do come down to like, what are your end goals? What are you trying to accomplish? How do you want your listener to feel when they walk away from a piece like this? That to me are extremely fascinating and extremely important, even though they might be very, very detailed or very niche.
Right. Okay, this is just a reminder that you're watching Making Waves. I'm Drew Leifheit, and we're chatting today with Jeff Large of Come Alive Creative about the authenticity of audio podcasts versus some of that other stuff out there, the AI stuff. And what about that, Jeff? So when it comes to the kinds of podcasting that Come Alive is doing, Come Alive Creative, what would you say gives you a competitive edge compared to what other agencies out there are doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer more, not necessarily in comparison. I think there's a lot of really fantastic agencies out there. For our stuff and the type of feedback that we get, we're very goal oriented. There's types of shows just from a technical standpoint where we have some of our clients, like the show you just listened to. So that had the perspective of, we want broad reach. We want to actually inform a lot of people. We're hoping to make an influence at a larger scale. And because of the way that we designed it and built it, it resulted in hundreds of thousands of downloads. It resulted in a lot of engagement, tons of reviews, lots of people connecting to it. We just got, even though it's since sunset, we just, for example, got a request from a college out of the States that they could actually put it behind, kind of in their library, of the gated library. Can we use this to reference like long into the future for part of our curriculum and things like that? And like, that's amazing to be able to hit that. On the flip side, we've done some shows at face value that might feel very generic or boring or those types of things. But one was in particular for, say, like a clinical documentation, like insurance type of situation or healthcare type of a thing, where it's basically they were using voice tech to capture. You go in, you're like, "Doctor, I hurt my knee," and the doctor's like, "Well, tell me about what happened." And then you're like, "Well, I was skateboarding and I fell down and scraped it." This technology is capturing all this stuff. It's creating the doctor notes. It's creating a separate list of the insurance coded type information. It's saving a ton of time. It's really helpful, but to the generic listener, it's like not interesting at all. And what they did was they needed it to inform the sales process, to be able to show other clients who are considering their software of, hey, this is what real users are working with and how they're feeling about it and how it's helping them. And it also, they used it for their onboarding. So anybody that was coming into this pretty technical space were able to hear directly from the users of what was going on. That one had significantly lower numbers, like maybe 100-ish episodes or 100 downloads per episode, but it did exactly what they needed. And so that's like one of the big things out of the gate, is to be goal oriented and to create something that actually meets what you need it to do. It's like, it is audio, and there are a lot of uniquenesses that I love about audio, but ultimately it's the vehicle that gets you somewhere. And then I think the other piece that comes into is really just the relationships that we form with our clients. We get a lot of good, people enjoy like all the stuff that you would expect from any type of full service company, to be able to save time, to be able to have somebody show up with expertise, to be able to just kind of show up, do your thing and leave and not have to worry about it. Like, those are all givens, but it's the relationships and the friendships and the way that we handle working with people, again, on that human level, that we get comments, and that shows up in our testimonials, which is nice. And so those are some of the things that kind of, I know that our clients appreciate about working with us.
Cool. Well, so kind of circling back around to the subject of today's show, there was this contention that AI is changing so much of what creatives do. So I'm wondering, how is it affecting how you and your colleagues are producing podcasts? For example, are there any tools that you're using in your daily work, AI tools that make things easier or more streamlined?
Yeah, there's I should have pulled my operations guy in on some of this, because he's using stuff that I'm not even totally familiar with, to be honest. But one of the major tools is something that I think most podcasters are probably familiar with, is Descript. Descript's really gotten surprisingly significantly better in a pretty short time frame, where at some points say some of the editing features we just dismissed, say like a year ago, where it was like, oh yeah, the team can completely do better than this on the fly. And then it started to become a little more challenging. Where like, can they? Like, there's certain aspects that it can, from an audio production standpoint. We don't use it for everything, but there's elements that it does really well. Some of the cleanup it can do pretty well, and some of those things. Another aspect is we have had situations where, say, for example, our clients would do the tracking and they were busy. And so we had to block off time. We knew we weren't going to get them for another long while. And if there was a mistake and we didn't have a second take of it, we have a few situations where we have done some voice modeling and we were able to just clean up like individual words where we weren't creating like full sentences or paragraphs or anything, but just tiny little pickups that normally we'd need to get them back on the call, and it becomes really inconvenient for everyone. And then I'd say the last one that has been helpful as well is a lot of the different softwares that allow you to analyze a show and create kind of some of the notes around it. And so we never have any of everything gets overviewed by a human still at this point. And we do have some shows though that like maybe we're pulling the outline from AI because it can just do it significantly faster. And then we kind of double check it. And it's like, okay, here's the general structure. Maybe we rework these things because these 2 points that the AI pointed out really aren't that relevant or are they important to the conversation. Sometimes we'll look at it from a show notes standpoint and we're saying, all right, what are the different ways? And I think the big thing is, at least at this point still, you're basically getting average. Like with the way that it's kind of been designed, or if you're even running stuff against the Chat GPT, asking it a question, I mean, you got to understand that right currently with all of the modeling, just grabbing a ton of information and kind of giving you the best answer it thinks it can. And then you look at it and you're like, all right, how can I make this better? How can I make it more appealing to a person? And so it's still sort of the way that we go about it, where we're using it for some of the lift aspects or maybe some of the technical aspects that it's just becoming pretty good at, but it's still everything is getting that final touch and final proof from a person, because we know it's being delivered to a person and it's being listened to by people. And so we want to just keep our hands in it at this point still.
Right. Gotcha. What's been your impression of some other machine learning content out there? Have you noticed anything that you think is, good, bad, or ugly?
I don't have any specifics. I'm not gonna like put anything on blast. The thing that I become leery of or hesitant of, say for example, something like recycled or repurposed content. There's a lot of elements to this of like, I am a fan of work smarter, not harder, and a lot of these mantras that you hear often. But if we lose sight of where we're going, and this is why, like, to me, the goal is so important. If we lose sight of where we're going, if we lose sight of what we're trying to convey, you might just get lost for the sake of making something. I would rather make something intentionally. I would rather make something meaningfully. I would rather spend more time on something and do it very well and let it be a great representation of my company or my clients or those types of things versus more canned or mass produced approach. And that's the thing I worry about, where sometimes it can do it and it does an all right job. I've been playing around with, say, even we have a new project that we've taken on, and so I've been playing around with some of the scripts pull features, or even Riverside does this as well, where it's like magic quotes. I forget what they call them, but basically they're going through and they're scanning for like the most important information. And sometimes it's like, all right, that actually was one of the things that I cited when I was having the interview. That was a pretty good one. And then other times it's like, what is that? Like, it was like this giant pause in between us talking. Like, why did you pull this? And so if I'm not paying attention, and this is why I still think it's important to have a human look at things of, is this a representation of what we want, and making that final call about at least overseeing it. That's important. And so those are some of the things that I'm noticing, I suppose, with what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Are there any specific things that you're trying to stay aware of in your podcasting business to maintain authenticity and whatever storytelling, conversation, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, maybe just like myself. Kind of what I mean by that, like that self-awareness. It's something. It's not mandatory, but I've noticed that our whole team practices it, and our clients are very like the people who were sort of drawn with each other are aware of what's going on. Like anytime I listen, if I'm reviewing a piece, for example, so a lot of the time I'm personally not very good at combing through all of the information and assembling. That's just not something that I do well, but my team does. And so they'll go through and they'll pull together this rough draft. And then I do something where maybe I'm listening along, but I'm not just watching, like I'm not watching the transcript or anything. I'll grab a deck of cards and I'll just like be shuffling or just do something physical, playing guitar or something. And so it's on in the background. And you listen for those things, those moments where something's like off or something in the interview itself. When you're conducting the interview, you're like, oh, that was an excellent point, and you write it down. And so it's like staying aware of where am I curious? Where am I appalled? Where am I feeling embarrassed or cringy or like those types of things? It's not really like a tool or a product or anything like that, but just staying aware in that regard. And then more broadly, and maybe a little more to the intent of your question, it's just hard. Like it's really not possible to keep up right now, especially with, say, my role and even the things that I've been focused on. It's something that we've been talking about internally. It sounds like it's one of the things that one of my people is going to just try to pay attention to. And even if we put some boundaries on it of, all right, let's at least keep up with the tools that we are consistently using and the features that are rolling out and how we might be able to leverage them. But it's part of what I was saying of this is a new landscape, and you can't just put your head in the sand and ignore it. I also am not about ultimate adoption of everything, because that's just like a floodgate that's going to drown you if you try to take that on. And so it's trying to manage it in a way. We're just doing the best we can with what we got ultimately. And so far so good.
Jeff, in terms of, what you value in an audio podcast, what are your feelings about the market in terms of, say, what your clients are looking for? If in the context of, let's say, very crass memes that have been going around lately, or, you know what I mean? Sometimes I feel like we're just drowning in content, and I've always tried to do things. Okay, let's say I'd rather do things that's quote unquote matter. I'd rather do things that have some kind of long-term impact. I appreciate your nuclear podcast's impact in education. That's fantastic. I'm just wondering how you're feeling about that, given that so much of our daily lives is about consumption, and I feel that you're trying to do something of very high quality. How are you feeling about the prospects for that and going forward?
Yeah, I think that is also an interesting thing to think about, and something that came to light for me. It's funny that you frame it that way, because even yesterday I had an interview. I had the fortunate enough to spend some time with a gentleman named Matthew Pollard, and he has written a couple books, all from an introvert's perspective. I think it's like The Introvert's Guide to Sales and The Introvert's Guide to Networking. He's a very talented guy, and he helps companies often increase their sales, but also in his networking book, a lot to do with like branding and figuring out your why and your message, and really a culmination of a lot of different things like Simon Sinek's why and a lot of these different things that get thrown around a lot in business. And he's pretty talented at it, from the times I've been able to see him speak, reading his books, and then spending some time with him yesterday. And he brought that to my attention as something that he noticed right away, even in our short one-to-one conversation, of there's this element of you can just get stuff out there like at scale, and there's also this element that there's things that are worth doing. And so for me, it's just becoming overtly clear that any client that I work with is going to be a non-negotiable of, I need people who are passionate about what they're talking about and what they're doing. I look at the nuclear one, for example. Like, they had a very clear mission. It was former Secretary of Defense William Perry. That was pretty much his life's work, has been to raise awareness around nuclear issues and to try to eliminate them as much as he humanly possibly could. So that's one thing. And I look at other stuff where it's more, could be viewed as more generic. Another one of our clients is EOS Worldwide. And so it's a big business framework that people use to run their businesses. It'd be similar to there's other pretty popular ones like the Rockefeller Habits and different things like that. And EOS is a very giving culture. They have quite the amazing team. They have a lot of fantastic people working with them. And the shows that we've been doing for them, really digging into like real life stories. They have a lot of grit to them. They're exploring things that are like kind of do or die situations for the people, like the clients that they have and the people that they're working with and the businesses that are using their framework. And that's a commonality that's just coming through more and more. It's the people that have something meaningful to share. They want to do it well. They want to rise above the noise. It's kind of that whole idea. Maybe two high level analogies would be like the noise to signal that you often hear about, of that type of a thing in the audio world, of like being the signal versus just being part of the noise. And the other one that I think about often with AI is even just how we've handled, say, something like furniture, where there's this industrial revolution and you have this huge thing where you just get this mass produced, nothing against IKEA. I have a few IKEA pieces in my house, but you get this kind of IKEA mentality with getting your furniture. But then also there's handmade goods. There's handcrafted stuff for custom spaces, vintage type wares. Like even my little thing for any of the viewers, my it's not an ottoman, what the heck is it called? Credenza. The credenza thing that I have back there, I got it from like a vintage furniture store just because I thought it was cool. And then I have my knockoff Eames chair, which was like a Herman Miller piece. And because I wanted my office to have a certain feel, like I wanted to have a certain comfort to it. And so there's space for that in content. Like there's still people that care at that level and that are willing to put in the effort and the resources that it takes to make something that's more than just a talking head show or sit down, like that actually represents the mission and the values and these things that make up who they are and what their companies are.
You know, when you were talking about the human aspect of producing the nuclear series, it made me think of like a staff editorial meeting, you know, and actually kind of comes back to even how we came up with what we were going to discuss today. You know, you have a little push and pull with other people, another person or several other people, right? So say, oh, well, you know, that story about, or, you know, that quote about Oppenheimer, I think is really weak, but maybe you like it, right? So
yeah,
we hash it out and we come to a consensus about how that's going to fit into the series, et cetera. And I think that, yeah, so obviously machine learning it's probably just going for it, right? What it has access to. There's no pushback in terms of, you know, what it selects. Maybe it's whatever is just available. Anyway, just
let me jump in because that's such a good point, and it's something that we haven't really talked about yet. Of part of creation, a lot of what we've talked about so far, we've been focusing on the outcome, like the final result. And so it's like, yeah, you can kind of go tit for tat against humans versus AI and making content. You could do that all day long, but there is an element of part of creation is the journey that it takes you on and to get there. And you immediately reminded me that every single one of those episodes from that whole series, at least 4 of us were in the transcription document, brought 3 or 4 different rounds, going through and saying, oh, I like this, I hate that needs to get changed, that music's a little off right there. Oh, I love this thing. No, I hate this thing. All right, you got to kill your darling. Fine, I submit. And like all of that journey to refine yourself. And it's something I've even thought about from the writing side, where you get there's this like different trends where it's like, okay, don't make your writing more complicated than like a 6th grade reading level. And it's like, okay, maybe that makes it more accessible, but like, what does that doing to us? Like, what is it doing to us as a society if we're not going to choose to think deeper or journey further or be wrong, or just like all of that self-discovery that comes along with this, and the intimacy that you can build with another human. I mean, even the show. What was the first topic that you threw at me that I was like, I can talk about that, but I don't really want to? Do you remember?
Right. I think maybe it had to do with I think it related to a podcaster's niche that I have a person whose acquaintance I've made. I think it had to kind of do with what's the acronym now? It's escaping my mind. No, it wasn't about diversity and inclusion, was it?
I don't think so.
Okay. Maybe it had something to do more with internal purposes for, maybe like.
Yeah. I think it was. You were talking about internal company casts type of a thing. And like I said, I get that one example I gave earlier. It's like, I can talk about it because we've done it, but I'm not super passionate about it. And so you and I sort of pushed back and forth. We got on the phone. We talked for a while, and then we're like, oh, cool. This would be a fun topic to actually. And that would have never happened if we were just like, AI, what is the most audience grabbing attention topic that we can discuss? Like,
Right,
if you just ran it through the machine, you lose some of that. You lose some of that rapport with one another, in just the journey that it takes to get to where we are right now.
Right. Yet another reminder, because we are human and we're live. You're watching Making Waves. I'm talking to Jeff Large, and we are talking about the authenticity of finely produced audio products, such as the podcast that he's doing at his agency. I just want to open things up. I hear my phone, receiving pings. I'm pretty sure that there are some people out there, and I welcome your questions if you'd like to ask Jeff something about podcasting in general, or about what we're speaking about today. Jeff, what do you think? What are your thoughts on the human voice? Obviously, we hear a lot of AI-generated voices more and more these days. And I'm curious what you think about the human voice's role is in podcasting, and sort of in terms of authenticity.
Can you elaborate a little bit? Because I feel like that could go in a couple different directions.
How important is it, for example, in the podcast that you produce, that it's a sentient being that is reading a script, for example?
Yeah, to me, it's kind of a non-negotiable for 90% of the work that we do. Like, I'm thinking, trying to think of the opposite. Like, when would it be fine? Like, if I can understand and say generic or canned, if you're doing a type of show where you have a canned intro and it's the same thing every time, or maybe you're duplicating an ad, you start to skirt that line because maybe you record it once, or if you're going to say the same thing. I even think of, like, say, some of the meditation apps or some of the prayer apps, and you get the person saying maybe similar lines over and over again. You're probably not going to record that line individually every single time. You're likely going to take a few takes and you're going to go for it. And you even see that in, say, musicians' work, where sometimes, like, you create the riff and then you loop it out, or whatever it might be, the beat, and then it loops out after that. It's not like you need to literally be the person hitting the drum or pushing the button every single time to have it be authentic. But when it comes to the voice, and especially when I think of, like, the projects that we're doing, it's really a non-negotiable, because the shows that we make are human, and they're about the human story and about the human relationship. And so even in our tracking, and what I mean by this is, say, for example, you have some of the shows that we produce are that narrative style or that dynamic. You might have a couple different interviews, and then we edit it in a way that they sort of flow. But at times you need to interject context, or maybe clip A won't flow nicely into clip B, and so you need the host or the talent to fill in that gap, to bridge whatever's missing, to write in and out of the tape, so to speak, out of the audio. Having the human voice there, you could replicate it, but I just think you're doing a disservice. Like we could model my voice, and I've seen people using AI to train and to be able to scale themselves. But to me, I don't have a desire to like it's interesting. Like it's interesting and you could argue even from an authentic point of I can help more people because I'm scaling my time and I teach AI that this is who I am and these are all the books that I've read and I can get it to answer questions like I would with 90% accuracy. But it's still void of that relationship. You're still void of that human to human connection. And I do think that's going to just continue to become more and more important. Especially there's a lot of, I mean, we didn't really talk about going into this, but there's a lot of animosity out there. Even look at, say right now, we're entering into more heated American political cycle and things. And it's an absolute nightmare a lot of the time, just watching all these different people get so upset with each other. And it's like, are we really getting any better? Like, are all of these our best options and all these things? And it's, when you can meet a human, like this morning when I was having coffee, I got to watch my little girls dance during dance time because we'll play music and let them dance. And it's like, that's a human connection that's important. It's going to fuel me. You and I being able to speak for a little bit is going to continue to fuel me. Whoever's listening, it's just interesting. It's very interesting and something that I think we should be sensitive to.
No, a question has appeared miraculously from a human being.
we hope it's not a bot.
I know this person. I know he's a very provocative Hungarian gentleman.
Awesome.
Domokos is his name. He says, talking about voice, what do you think will voice actors? I'm confused. It's a little bit confusing. Voice actors must do some copyright moves not to steal and use their AI replicated voice.
Okay. First of all, I'm no lawyer, so this is outside of my pay grade. But I'm friends with a fair amount of voice actors, and I know, we just worked with. Who did we work with? It was so cool. We worked with on one of our EOS projects. We worked with one of the voice actresses from like the Borderlands game, and then she did a lot of the narrative work for one of their more canned shows that we were doing. We're kind of recreating just some information. And I don't know, because that's all AI is doing. Like, I mean, and I know a lot of this is, I don't even know where it's at from a legal standpoint, but it's just collecting everybody's work and recreating it. And some of it is just outright stripped and stolen. And then you have like this voice thing. And on one hand, you get somebody like, what's the YouTube account? There I Ruined It. That's pretty funny. If you've ever seen that, he'll just take songs and he'll modify the voice. He'll like do his voice. It's all in, it's not mockery. It's, what's the word? There's like the legal use of it. Parody. So he's doing a lot of parody stuff where he'll have like Johnny Cash singing I like big butts or something like that. And like on one hand, it's like, yeah, that's funny and humorous and whatever. And then on the other hand, I've seen it already argued within, like, say, the U.S. government of like, well, what is this doing? So there's, I'll just say that there's massive repercussions and it's moving very fast. If legal and kind of a national level is going to be able to keep up with it, it's like, probably not, just based on the speed of which they do things. But I don't know. I don't know how you'd safeguard that, but it's something that I'm paying attention to, and I feel for voice. I mean, it's just we got to do something. I don't know what it is though. So sorry, I can't answer that a little better.
No. Hey,
do you have any? I was gonna say, do you have thoughts, Drew?
Yeah, it's just a really quite a ball of wax, isn't it? I think that in practice, how I think that how could anybody even keep up with the copyright aspect of things? It's just like a moving target, right? So I think that at the end of the day, it kind of reminds me of the days of Napster, and yeah, some people will be punished perhaps, but at the end of the day, that maybe everybody just kind of throws up their hands because there's really not much you can do.
Yeah, the game changes for sure.
Jeff, I'm curious what your views are on in terms of like the real human voice and AI generated voices. How do you think an audience or a listener processes those?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just speak for myself. The more you hear something, the more maybe I'll say it this way. We're getting to a spot where we kind of have to question everything and if it's real. And not voice related, but there was a video, an Instagram video that I was watching with my wife of like this guy catching a fish or something. And it was 100% not real. But she was like, this is real. And it was just sort of like, she just kind of had this faith in these people. And I'm not saying it as a knock at all. She sort of just believed. And it was like, there's qualities and aspects of it that looked believable. But I'm like, I'm naturally skeptical and she's naturally very loving and trusting. And so it's like one of the differences you have to factor in here. But so she's like, oh, that's real. I'm like, no, that's not a chance that's real. I'm like, this is totally for the views. Look at blah, blah, blah. And she's like, no, but look at this. And then sure enough, we scroll into the comments and everybody's like, fake, fake, fake. But it sucks. Like to a degree, it sucks because you look at photography and you're like, oh man, what a great, beautiful nature scene. Oh, I wish I could put a cabin right here. Well, guess what? You can now. And so then we're like looking at that. And the same thing with voice. All of a sudden, it's like, did that person really say that? It just comes down to like, where do you want to be with it? If somebody else showed me one other crazy thing, it might be worth you looking up. So the ever so loved Jake Paul, YouTuber, Disney guy, boxer, about to fight Mike Tyson, that guy just came out with some new product line. And he sent out these promo boxes that a bunch of people were talking about where he deep faked everybody that he sent the promo box to. So he deep faked their face and their voice and had like the thing that you got. It'd be like if I sent you a product, like I came up with a new drink line, energy drink, and I sent you one, Drew, and you open the box and it's you talking about how much you love my energy drink. So this is this promo that he sent out, completely AI driven. Like, does it get your attention? Yes. Is it kind of quirky and fun? Objectively, yes. Will it get buzz and people talking about it? Yes. But is that the thing you want to be known for? Like, is that the type of person you want to be? Is that the company you want to be? For me, I can definitively say no. Like, I just go back, I throw back to my old literature days of Fahrenheit 451. It's like, I want to read a physical book. Maybe I'm old school and I'm just going to end up burning with the rest of it when like we said, when Her and Ex Machina and Terminator all kick in, whatever, just to be kind of purposely flamboyant with it. But that's not what I want to make. That isn't who I want to work with, and that's not what I want to make. And there's places for it that are appropriate, but I know in the type of content that I'm making, most of the time it's not.
Yeah, what do you think of the appropriateness of using AI? So I knocked you over the head with that little clip earlier. It was a little bit of a surprise, but what do you think about that? Do you think that there will be things that are sort of more appropriate to use AI?
No, I certainly do. I mean, I think it goes back to goal. Like I forget the gentleman's name, but he was pretty early on. I know he's not the only one, but he purposely made his co-host AI of this podcast, and he kind of jumped in. It's Rob, maybe. I'd have to look him up on X. But he started a podcast and he had an AI co-host, and it was actually a voice actress that he paid, that he modeled the voice after, and then was able to set this up. And it was like a legitimate thing. I think it's still running at this point. You have it all over the place on TikTok. There's like the one or two standard voices that narrate all the videos. Still at this point, kind of like lack of real influx or depth or sort of like the intimacy and then the nuances of voice. So there are situations that are appropriate. Like I think about it in the context of even it'd be kind of fun to maybe create something with AI that you were able to do. It just makes things more accessible because like the one that I was thinking about is like, what if you did like a children's fictional podcast, and instead of needing to spend a lot of money, this goes back to the voice actress thing, and you modeled voices and you had them constructing and telling these stories, and you were able to do it to even do it like a beta version or whatever. So it just really depends on intent. Like it depends on where you're going, what you're trying to accomplish, if it fits inside those goals, and if it does, sure, and if not, maybe not. So I mean, I'm no authority on this by any means. I just know how I like to use it, and I think there's plenty of space. I'm more of an abundance mindset where I'm like, yeah, go for it, try it, see if it works, see what you can do. there's a lot of potential. So I'm not sure. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And getting back to sort of, what we deem to speak about today, what are your thoughts on how audio podcasting might, maintain an edge, even as, AI increasingly makes inroads into generating all sorts of media?
Yeah. I think, at this point, again, what we're doing is we're just trying to stay privy in the ways that we can. We're trying to leverage it for the things that are not necessary. I really believe there's 3 types of work. There's type of work that only I can do or only you can do. There's the type of work that a human needs to do, but that human doesn't necessarily need to be yourself. And then there's the type of work that can just be automated. The new capabilities of AI will expand that bucket of what can be automated. But there are still creative decisions and choices and technicalities that we'll need to make as humans that really should probably stay in the realm of a human. And so if you just, again, I think the answer is living in the tension. If you swing that, oh my gosh, this is not what I want to be, I don't want anything to do with it, and you shove your head in the sand, you're probably going to get burned or forgotten or close. If you swing on the other side of like, this is 100% the wave of the future, I'm going all in, there isn't a level of, again, this gets a little more philosophical, but there's probably a level of humanity that you're going to be dismissing if you go all in on it. Whereas I feel like the companies that are going to thrive are probably going to embrace the tension and figure out where they stand in the midst of it. Like maybe it's a little more here, maybe it's a little more on the other side. That seems like the way, at least, again, just from my limited experience, that's the way that we're intending on moving forward at this point.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, I really appreciate your time. If you don't mind, could I ask you just a couple more questions?
Yeah, shoot for it.
We have, of course, a very international audience today, or at least the people that signaled that they were going to be with us are all people from all over the European continent and all over the world. And I'm curious if you could give us kind of a portrait of how you see where is podcasting at in the United States right now? How has it progressed, and where does it stand, or what's its importance, for example?
I feel like that answer is really subjective. So how would you like me to respond? I feel like you could go all over the place with that.
Well, I'll tell you what. I just give you a little injection of what I have observed here in Hungary.
Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be helpful.
I see that podcasting is the new secret sauce. Yeah, of course, there have been podcasts for a long time, but a lot of people have been much more intrigued by podcasting, and some people are really. I know one agency in particular that's just doing gangbusters, crazy amount of content, or at least what I see in terms of their LinkedIn feed, and so whereas I think that in the States, and sort of where I was coming from quite a while ago, there was a little bit of a lag here. And I think that, maybe the whole world in a way kind of emulates what happens in the United States in terms of media. There just seems to be such a, hyperspace kind of media situation. So yeah, I'm wondering, if you're able to give context of sort of in terms of how things have panned out.
Yeah, that helps. I think things do move faster here in general, and a lot of the trends that you see here can and do often bleed other places. And so I think about like our teams all dispersed, where we have people here, Europe. I think we might be on most continents. I think we're here, we're Europe, we're Australia, we're South Africa, and we're South America at this point. And even talking internally within the teams to watch something, say, like kind of grow in its speed and immensity here, and then you start to hear about that happening in Europe, And then it's like a little later, you start to hear about that happening in South Africa. Like, I mean, there maybe like was like a 3-year behind us type of a thing in terms of adoption rates. And so you do see those types of trends. And I feel like maybe on a broader scale of what I'm witnessing here, it's we're kind of like you get different people naming it, like maybe quote unquote the bubble bursts. You did see a bit of a pullback, at least on a corporate level. A lot of these large branded shows, a lot of these big entities. You take something like just even with the crazy news of Pacific Content getting kind of shut down, and then now it just came out, I think even yesterday maybe they made it public, or more recently, like Harry Morton from Lower Street ended up buying Pacific Content, which is like amazing news. Super happy for those guys, and you get all these big transitions like that. And so there was a bit of a pullback. There was a bit of, I think, of an ad spend drop. I don't have all of the stats in front of me, and so you have that happening. But at the same time, I don't see slowdown in the more intentional sense, because the people who still want to do a show, they want to do it, but it's almost like they understand they have to do it a little better, or they have to need to do it well. On one hand, the technology, the software, the hardware, the equipment that you can get has made the barrier to getting into podcast or starting a podcast incredibly low. Like, it's very easy to start one, but it's a whole nother ball game to be able to create something that's worth listening to, and that will have longevity over time, and listenership over time, and engagement over time. And the threshold is just higher now, in my opinion, where a couple of years ago, back 2018, we're all arguing about what's the best microphone. And now it's like, okay, just by default, you better have some clean, good sound in general. And now, because you've cleared up these baseline technical things, you get to start to decide, all right, like either A, what we've sort of been talking about of how can I just blast this out to everybody very easy and try to make it this passive income type of a thing, or B, how can I create a story that's worth listening to? And now that I can get rid of all this technical worry in my head, it's almost like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, you get the basics out of the way, and now we can go, how can we develop a better story? How can I find the right characters who are going to tell my audience really the things I want to know, instead of just accepting anybody on my interview show? Like, we have room to get better, and that's a lot of what I feel at this point. I don't know if it's really happening at mass scale, but again, it's where we're spending a lot of our time.
Cool. And could you share with us, maybe outside of the stuff that you produce, are there any podcasts that you listen to regularly?
Yeah, the truth is I don't, because I have no. It's like I'm making them all the time, but yeah. Oh my gosh, the podcast guy doesn't really listen to podcasts. So what I listen to is when people suggest them to me, because I have no commute. I work from home. There's really the only place I have to go, or that I want to go, is church. I do drive a little bit for work, like just in general. Like, I'm part of a business group that I have to drive to the other side of the state at times. And so I will listen then. I found myself listening to a lot of audiobooks lately when I do. Or if I'm at the gym, I'll just turn on like the Black Keys or Muse or something. But I think, to directly answer your show, the last one that I really enjoyed, it's a tiny bit dated right now. I'm trying to think of some ones that I really enjoyed that were recommended to me. One was Wind of Change. That was, the premise of that one was an investigative journalist was trying to see if the Scorpion song Wind of Change was actually written by the FBI in order to help overthrow communism. So that one was fascinating and well done and pretty funny. The other one, it's a part of the Chameleon series. It was either, I think it's Lost Boys. It was Lost Boys or Wild Boys. I forget what it was. And that was about these two teenagers that mysteriously came out of like the woods in this remote town in Canada, and one of them had an eating disorder and some other stuff. So that one was kind of interesting. Again, more like just fictional, or not fictional, but the narrative style. And then I have listened, like, and then there's just always the go-tos where it's like you can't really go wrong with like an Ira Glass or a Guy Raz or This American Life, or just some of these classics that really stand the test of time. So when I do listen, that's a lot of the stuff I like to do.
Gotcha. Okay, Jeff. And do you have any parting thoughts for us in terms of keeping it real and authentic, and what you're doing, and in the context of the wider media universe?
Yeah, I just think I would just challenge the listener to stay true to yourself, and that's going to look different for everyone. But it's important to sometimes pump the brakes. It's important to stay aware. I mean, it sounds hokey. I mean, maybe it's 'cause I've just been doing a lot of like personal work and journaling and things, but it's important. Like, think about the actions that you take throughout the day. Think about the decisions that you make in terms of what you're creating. Pick up a book like The Artist's Way, or like Rick Rubin's new The Creative Act, and just don't be afraid to explore these things. Don't be afraid to take those risks. I don't know. I challenge that because I think we'll all be better for it if we can all become a little more self-aware of ourselves and each other. It's definitely not going to hurt.
That's a lovely thought to end on, Jeff. Thank you so much. Our time on Making Waves has come to an end. Thanks to everybody for tuning in, for their questions, the question. And we welcome your feedback, of course, on the posts. You can watch the whole show. It's at the same link, both on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, where the invitation was to the show. Jeff Large of Come Alive Creative is just one of the spectacular individuals doing amazing things in this challenging world, whom I'll continue to interview on Making Waves. So stay tuned. I'm Drew Leifheit. Thanks again, Jeff. Peace.
Thank you.